July, the year 971. The banks of the Danube. The scene unfolding here defies the usual logic of the Middle Ages. On one bank, surrounded by a glittering retinue, a horseman in golden armor stands frozen in waiting. Before us is John Zimisces, Emperor of Byzantium, master of the Second Rome. He is waiting. A simple boat approaches the shore. The oarsmen lean into their strokes, fighting the current of the great river. Sitting among them is a warrior who is indistinguishable from the rank-and-file soldiers. He is adorned by neither purple robes nor a crown. He wears only a clean white shirt. His head is shaved, save for a long lock of hair, a scalp lock, the mark of nobility. And in his ear hangs a gold earring set with a ruby and 2 pearls. This prince is rowing right alongside everyone else. Look closely at this paradox: the monarch of a superpower on horseback and the ruler of the north working an oar. It would seem that before us is a meeting between a master and a barbarian, but the reality is different. The man sitting in the boat holds the empire by the throat. Before you is Sviatoslav Igorevich, a figure who entered history with a Slavic name but lived his life by the harsh laws of the Scandinavian god of war. In previous episodes, we saw how his grandfather, Rurik, laid the foundation of the state in cold Ladoga, how Oleg the prophet captured Kiev through cunning, and how his mother, Princess Olga, erected walls of order and law. Sviatoslav will reject all of this. He is neither a builder nor an administrator. His nature is pure elemental force. In this episode, the history of the last Viking on the Kievan throne will come to life. The drama of a ruler who slept on a horse blanket, ate meat roasted on coals, and despised the stone palaces of his own capital. It will become clear why the Grand Prince of Kiev hated Kiev and strove to transplant the heart of Rus to a foreign country, to the Danube, declaring, "I am the center of my lands." We will trace how his famous challenge, "I am coming for you," transformed into the first example of information warfare, sowing panic in the enemy camp before the battle even began. You will witness the collapse of the Khazar Khaganate, the clay colossus of the East. We will learn how with this victory, the prince personally signed his country's death warrant, opening the gates to new, more ruthless enemies. This is a tale of tragic realization, a story about how an empire cannot live forever in the saddle. Sviatoslav attempted to turn Rus into a vast military trading post without borders, but history proved a cruel truth. A state must have a home. His life rushed by swiftly, like the flight of an arrow, and his death became encrusted with legends. We will find out if the civilized Greeks truly ordered his assassination by the nomads, and why the Khan of the Pechenegs, having slain the prince, bound his skull in gold, turning it into a cup for wine. The long ships are launched, the swords are sharpened. We are setting off on the last great campaign of Pagan Rus. The year 964. The wild fields. The young prince Sviatoslav Igorevich makes a decision that completely alters the laws of warfare of that era. Usually, nomads and Varangians relied on sudden raids, plunder, and rapid retreat. A stab in the back was considered a classic tactic of the steppe, but Sviatoslav demonstratively refuses stealth. He sends messengers to all 4 corners of the world with an ultimatum as short and sharp as the crack of a whip. "I am coming for you." Historians often romanticize this gesture, singing praises to the warrior's nobility. However, the cold calculation of a strategist suggests otherwise. This is not a knightly whim, but calculated psychological terror. The enemy finds themselves in a stalemate. The opponent knows of the approaching army and the fearsome reputation of the commander, but is deprived of information regarding the time and place of the attack. The constant anticipation of doom exhausts them more than the battle itself. Sviatoslav crushed the enemy's will before his longships even touched the shore. Instead of a mere raid, he chose the Khazar Khaganate itself as his target. A map of the 10th century clearly explains the reason. Khazaria had turned into a monster, straddling the key trade arteries of Eurasia. The Volga trade route, along which flowed silver and silk, was held tight in their iron fist. The Khazars levied tribute on Slavic tribes, the Viatici, the Severians, and the Radimici. Sviatoslav deemed such a situation unacceptable. The prince had no desire to pay middlemen. He strove to control the trade flows personally. The commander acts with surgical precision. First, he liberates the Viatici, depriving the enemy of resources and loyal tributaries. Then follows a crushing blow to the heart of the empire. The warband descends rapidly down the Volga, inflicting a lightning-fast defeat unseen in those times. The defenses of Sarkel, the impregnable White Tower on the Don, are crushed. Itil, the luxurious capital in the river delta, collapses. Archaeologists still find traces of total destruction in these layers. What happened did not resemble a typical conquest. Khazaria was literally being wiped off the face of the earth. The scorched ruins on the sites of Khazar cities date back to the mid-960s. Where palaces and synagogues once towered, now only the wind howls. Sviatoslav triumphs. The superpower that held Eastern Europe in fear has ceased to exist. The victory seems absolute. The path to the east is open. Nothing threatens trade anymore. But behind this triumph hides a fatal strategic error. By destroying Khazaria, Sviatoslav tore down the dam with his own hands. The Khaganate did indeed parasitize its neighbors, but simultaneously it served as a shield, a powerful buffer that for centuries had held back the hordes of nomads from the depths of Asia. The prince shattered that barrier into fragments. Into the breach instantly poured the Pechenegs, ferocious, starving, and recognizing no treaties. Having finished off one enemy, Sviatoslav let thousands of others into his home. It is they, not unnoticed in the heat of the great victory, who will meet him a few years later at the Dnieper Rapids. However, right now, the warrior is not looking toward the steppe. His gaze is fixed on the south, to where the gold of the Danube beckons, to a new war and a grand dream. The year 967. Constantinople. Emperor Nicephorus Phocas, a renowned commander nicknamed the Pale Death of the Saracens, commits a fatal error. This miscalculation will soon flood the borders of the empire with rivers of blood. He seeks to crush the Bulgarian kingdom by using someone else's hands. Byzantine diplomacy follows an age-old strategy. Bribe one barbarian to destroy another, and then have him vanish back into his forests. The patrician Kalokiros arrives to meet Sviatoslav. The ambassador presents an argument of incredible power, 15 centenaria of gold. Translated into modern measures, this is nearly half a ton of the purest precious metal. A fantastic fortune. Before us is not simply a reward for a mercenary, but the budget for a full-scale war. Sviatoslav accepts the offer. For him, this contract looks perfect. He is being paid for the passion of his life, battle. The Rus warband crashes down upon Bulgaria. The campaign turns into an unstoppable avalanche. Within a matter of months, 80 cities along the Danube bow before the prince. The Bulgarian Tsar, Peter, struck down by the news of the rout, dies of a stroke. The Byzantines celebrate their success. The plan worked. Now the guest from the north is obliged to take his loot and dissolve into the Kievan snows. However, the mechanism malfunctions. Sviatoslav flatly refuses to leave. He peers into the vast expanses of the Danube and sees here not a foreign territory, but the true center of the world. At this crossroads of trade routes, the climate is milder, the wine is sweeter, and silver flows like a river. Why return to a cold capital when one can rule from the stone halls of Pechenegs? The prince decides on a geopolitical pivot that frightens even his loyal warriors. He announces the transfer of the capital. His manifesto has been preserved in the chronicles, the words of a man who has outgrown the borders of his own state. It is not pleasing for me to sit in Kiev. I want to live in Pechenegs on the Danube, for that is the center of my lands. The center of my lands. Appreciate the scale of this thinking. Mentally, Sviatoslav has ceased to be a Kievan ruler. He is designing a commercial empire stretching from the Volga to the Balkans. The prince explains the advantages of the new shores. All good things flow there. Gold, silks, wines, and fruits from the Greeks. Silver and horses from the Czechs and Hungarians. And from Rus, furs, wax, honey, and slaves. In this hierarchy, Rus is transformed merely into a raw resource base, a source of slaves and wax. The pulsing heart of life, luxury, and consumption is now located here. He is burdened by the administrative routine of his ancestors and chooses the crossroads of civilizations. But while the prince dreams of southern greatness, his past triumphs turn into a catastrophe. By crushing the Khazar Khaganate, he destroyed the only buffer that had held back the horde for centuries. Now the steppe is open. The year 968. The Pechenegs. The nomads arrive under the walls of Kiev. The city finds itself in a tight ring. Locked inside are the elderly Princess Olga and Sviatoslav's 3 grandsons, the future leaders of the country, including little Vladimir. Supplies of water and food are running out. Almost the entire army is fighting in the south. The fate of Rus hangs by a thread. Only the cunning of the voivode Pretich, who simulated the approach of the main forces, saves the Rurikid dynasty from destruction. Sviatoslav abandons the Danube feasts and rushes north. He breaks the siege, driving the enemy away. But instead of a solemn welcome, he receives a bitter verdict from his mother. The exhausted Olga throws it into his face. You, prince, seek foreign lands and care for them, but you have abandoned your own. This is a conflict of fundamental ideas. Olga personifies the state, order, protection, and responsibility. Sviatoslav is expansion, the eternal campaign, and the search for glory beyond the horizon. 3 days later, Olga passes away. Her son buries her, respecting his mother's will. No pagan funeral feasts or sacrifices. She was a Christian. The death of his mother severs the last thread connecting him to home. In 969, Sviatoslav effectively liquidates his assets in the north.
He distributes the lands among his sons. He leaves Yaropolk in Kiev. He sends Oleg to the Drevlians, and when the Novgorodians ask for a ruler, he indifferently gives them the bastard, Vladimir, the son of a housekeeper. "Take him," his gesture reads. For him, this is a stage already past, just a rear base. He once again proclaims, "I am coming for you." But now, his goal is not the defense of borders. He sets off after his dream, deciding to remain on the Danube forever. The prince doesn't suspect power has changed hands in Constantinople. Nicephorus Phocas has been murdered. The throne has been taken by John Zimisces, a short red-headed commander, a recognized genius of tactics, and he will not tolerate a northern wolf at the gates of the empire. The trap is snapping shut. Byzantine gold will soon turn into Byzantine steel.
In 969, Sviatoslav, blinded by his Danubian dreams, overlooked a tectonic shift in Constantinople. The murdered Nicephorus Phocas had been replaced by John Zimisces. Zimisces was rightfully considered a dog of war. Short of stature, red-haired, and endowed with colossal physical strength, he had spent years in the saddle striking down Arabs. The empire's best commander had no intention of tolerating barbarians on Roman soil. The emperor issues an ultimatum to Sviatoslav: "Take your payment and get out, back to the Dnieper." The prince responds with audacity bordering on madness. He doesn't just refuse, he challenges the superpower. Sviatoslav conveys, "The gold paid by you for peace will now turn against you. With this money, I will forge iron that will take everything else. Soon I will pitch my tent at the gates of Tsargrad myself." Now facing Byzantium is not a mercenary, but a conqueror. In the spring of 970, the Kievan ruler goes on the offensive. Having crossed the Balkans, his army bursts into Thrace. This army is a deadly alloy hungry for profit. Standing shoulder to shoulder are Varangian infantry, Hungarian cavalry, and Pechenegs. Yesterday's enemies of Kiev now serve Sviatoslav as cheap cavalry power. In whisper, the prince does not yet know that this tool will soon stab him in the back. Thrace is drowning in smoke. Refugees storm the gates of Constantinople. The capital is 100 kilometers away, just a couple of marches. Near Arcadiopolis, a battle thunders, arguments over which have not ceased for centuries. Arcadiopolis is a triumph of military propaganda and the fog of war. The tale of bygone years paints a grandiose victory. The Rus smash the Greeks and take rich tribute. But the Byzantine Leo the Deacon claims the opposite. Barda Skleros lured the nomads into a trap, exterminated them, and then crushed Sviatoslav's main forces. To find the truth, one must look at the terms of the peace. Sviatoslav did not enter Tsargrad. However, there was no talk of a crushing defeat either. After the battle, Zimisces agrees to pay tribute, and victors do not pay the vanquished. The prince accepts the payoff, displaying a frightening practicality. He demands a share not only for the living, but also for those who fell in battle. "We will take for the dead as well," he declared. It was a tax on the dead. Sviatoslav monetizes the death of his own people, squeezing the maximum gold out of the Greeks. Barda Skleros and Zimisces agreed to the deal not out of weakness. While rebellions raged in the east, the empire could not afford a protracted war. In whisper, peace became a trap into which Sviatoslav stepped with his head held high. With gold in his baggage trains, the prince retreated to the Danube fortress of Dorostolon. Confident in his triumph, he believed he had brought Byzantium to its knees. But while a feast was held in Dorostolon,
Constantinople was forging retribution. Tzimiskes used the winter to prepare the Immortals, elite cavalry clad in steel. In the shipyards, a fleet was being built, equipped with Greek fire, the very flame that had once destroyed Prince Igor's longships. The Byzantine war machine was set in motion. Sviatoslav believed the struggle was over, but he had merely given the executioner time to sharpen the axe. In whisper, with the spring floods, the Danube would turn into a cage from which there was no escape. Spring 971. Sviatoslav committed a fatal error common to many great conquerors. He underestimated the reaction speed of a bureaucratic machine. The prince assumed that the Byzantines, bogged down in intrigues, would not risk marching before the onset of summer. But John Tzimiskes preferred swords to paperwork. He thought in categories of tactics, not decrees. While the Rus feasted in Dorostolon, the emperor executed a forced march across the Balkan mountains. The Byzantine army moved with lightning speed over the mountain passes that the careless Sviatoslav had left unguarded. In April 971, the trap snapped shut. Sviatoslav wakes up to see not scattered detachments before the walls of Dorostolon, but the disciplined ranks of the Immortals, heavy cavalry encased in steel scales. Glancing at the Danube, he realizes the way home is cut off. The river is blocked by the imperial fleet. 300 ships, armed with siphons for Greek fire, have turned the water into an impassable wall of flame. A 3-month nightmare begins, entering history as the Siege of Dorostolon. Total confrontation between civilizations unfolded before us. On one side, the advanced military engineering of Byzantium, siege engines, ballistae, and the iron discipline of the legions. On the other, the fury of a beast cornered in a trap. The Rus were not accustomed to defending walls. Their element was the open field and the deck of a longship. In the confined space of the fortress, famine reigns, wounds fester, morale melts away. Here, the dark edge of pagan agony is laid bare. The Byzantine historian Leo the Deacon, describing these days, recorded soul-chilling testimonies. In a vain hope to appease the gods, Sviatoslav's warriors performed desperate rituals of a fading world. Under the full moon, they drown roosters and infants in the Danube. The bodies of falling comrades are consumed by the flames of pyres, while nearby, captives perish, summoned to serve their masters in the afterlife. There is no blind sadism in these acts, only a panicked cry for help directed at Perun. The men realized human will was not enough to break the steel grip of the empire. However, many of these facts may also be demonization of the Pagan Rus by the Byzantine historian. By July, the situation becomes critical. A council of war gathers in the fortress. Many commanders, looking at the exhausted men, suggest the only path. Under the cover of night, load onto the boats and slip past the Greek fleet. To run, to save their lives. Sviatoslav listens to them in silence. He faces a choice: survive by becoming a fugitive, or die by turning into a legend. For a Scandinavian konung who recognizes only one currency, eternal glory, the decision is predetermined. The prince rises and delivers a speech that became the quintessential of the Russian warrior code for a millennium to come. The chronicle has preserved these words, which still make the air ring. "Let us not shame the land of Rus, but let us lay down our bones here, for the dead have no shame. If we run, disgrace will be upon us." Listen closely to this phrase: the dead have no shame. Before us is a minted formula of honor. Death here does not mean the finale. It fixes one's status. Death in battle transforms a warrior into a hero forever. flight, however, brands one with cowardice that even life itself cannot wash away. Sviatoslav bets everything. He declares to his warband, "I will go before you. If my head falls, then look to yourselves." And the warriors, electrified by this self-sacrifice, answer with a single shout, "Where your head falls, there we will lay down our own heads." The gates of Dorostolon open. They come out not for victory. They come out to meet death in a way that the skalds will sing of. On July 20th, 971, the last decisive battle begins, leading to the strangest diplomatic meeting in the history of the Middle Ages.
July 20, 971. The final battle. Sviatoslav makes a desperate attempt to break the blockade. Wounded, bleeding, he personally leads the remnants of his army into the attack. But the ring of John Zimiscus's immortals does not break. The Rus are thrown back into the fortress. The situation is a stalemate. Sviatoslav has run out of resources. Zimiscus has run out of patience. His army is needed in the east, where the Arabs have become active. The moment for diplomacy arrives. But of what kind? The scene the next day unfolds as one of the most cinematic moments in medieval history. The Byzantine chronicler Leo the Deacon described it with photographic precision. The bank of the Danube, ordered ranks of Byzantine infantry in gleaming armor. Emperor John Zimiscus towers on horseback. He is clad in golden armor with a purple mantle on his shoulders. Around him shines his retinue. This is the embodiment of imperial grandeur, wealth, and hierarchy. A simple Scythian boat pulls up to the shore. Warriors sit in the dugout canoe. They row in unison, silently. There are no external differences in clothing among the crew. We focus on one of the oarsmen. In this man, we recognize the image familiar from the beginning of our journey. The same plain white shirt, powerful chest, and the steely gaze of blue eyes. Before us is the same appearance of a severe warlord, a shaved head with a lock of hair signifying noble birth, and a thick mustache. In his ear glints that same earring with a carbuncle and pearls. This oarsman is the Grand Prince of Kiev, Sviatoslav. The contrast is staggering. An emperor on a horse and a prince with an oar. The civilized Greeks saw barbarism in this, but they were mistaken. Before us is a demonstrative steppe aesthetic. Sviatoslav does not look like a European monarch, but like a nomad chieftain, like a Sarmatian, or the prototype of a Zaporizhian Cossack. Rowing alongside his men, he asserts the principle of military brotherhood. I am not above you. I am the first among you. The dialogue does not last long. The prince sits on the rowing bench. The emperor sits in the saddle on the shore. They conclude a peace. The terms of the Treaty of 971. Geopolitics. Rus forever renounces claims to Bulgaria and Crimea. Sviatoslav pledges never to wage war against the empire. Military alliance. Rus becomes an ally of Byzantium and pledges to assist it with troops. Logistics of survival. The heaviest but most necessary clause. Sviatoslav asks for bread for his starving army. Zimiscus agrees to issue 2 medimnoi of grain for every warrior. When the bread is distributed, a terrible figure is revealed. Of the vast army, only a third remains alive. Sviatoslav secures peace. He keeps the remnants of his warband, his weapons and banners. This is an honorable capitulation. He looks at Zimiscus from the water. Two great warriors understood each other. The emperor even sends ambassadors to the Pechenegs with a request to let the Rus pass home. But Sviatoslav fails to account for one thing. Byzantine diplomacy always has a double bottom. The emperor's request to let them pass might sound to the Pecheneg Khan like a tip-off. The beast is wounded, and he is coming to you. The vessels push off the shore. The prince carries home not gold and silks, but exhausted men, and the heavy feeling of an unfinished war. He is certain he will return. He does not yet know that the Danube was his last triumph, and the Dnieper will be his grave. Autumn 971. The mouth of the Dnieper. The flotilla of the Rus moves slowly upstream. Those who survived the siege of Dorostolon carry home not victory, but merely their lives and the remnants of Byzantine gold. The moment arrives that predetermines the fate of the dynasty for a decade to come. At one of the halts, Sviatoslav's old voivode, Sveneld, approaches him, the very same man whose wealth once provoked the envy of Prince Igor. Sveneld is an experienced strategist. He senses danger on his skin. The voivode proposes a plan. Go around the rapids on horseback, Prince, for the Pechenegs stand at the rapids. Sveneld's plan sounds sound and promises salvation. Abandon the heavy longships, mount horses, and break through to Kiev across the steppe, bypassing the ambushes. The voivode does exactly that. He leads his part of the warband by the dry route. But Sviatoslav refuses. Why? Pride? Fatigue? Or the fatalism of a man who realized the sunset of his era? Perhaps he simply could not leave the wounded, who could not be carried on horseback. We do not know the truth, but the decision taken becomes a death sentence for the prince. The fleet approaches the rapids, but passing them is impossible. The banks are teeming with nomads. Sviatoslav is forced to retreat to the sea, to Bieloberezye, to wait out the winter. The winter of 971 to 972 turned into hell on earth. The supplies issued by the Greeks ran out quickly. A famine began, horrifying even by the standards of Dorostolon. The Chronicle preserved a grim detail of the economic catastrophe of that winter. And the cost was great, so that a horse's head cost half a grivna. Half a grivna was a fortune. Warriors who had conquered Khazaria and Bulgaria were now giving their last gold for a piece of rotting meat. The great army turned into a crowd of emaciated ghosts. While the Rus were dying in the snows of Bieloberezye, diplomacy was at work in Constantinople and the steppe. Byzantine chronicles reveal the mechanism of betrayal. Emperor John Zimiscus, having concluded peace with Sviatoslav, had no intention of letting the northern wolf go alive. He sent an ambassador to the Pechenegs, Theophilus of Uchita, officially to ask to let the Rus pass, in reality, to warn. Sviatoslav is coming to you. He has much loot, but few men. The empire was eliminating the threat by proxy. Spring 972. The ice on the Dnieper breaks. Sviatoslav realizes he can wait no longer. The exhausted army loads into the boats and heads north. Ahead lie the Dnieper rapids, a ridge of rocks blocking the river for 70 kilometers. Nenasitets, the insatiable, is the most deadly of them. Here the river roars, falling from a height, and vessels must be dragged by land along the bank. It was precisely here that Khan Kuria was waiting for them. The battle instantly turned into a massacre. The Pechenegs, fed and rested, attacked the exhausted warriors at the portage. Sviatoslav had no chance.
The last Viking of Rus died just as he had lived, in a hopeless fight. Of the entire army, only the cautious Sveneld broke through to Kiev. He brought the soul-chilling news: Sviatoslav is no more. But the prince's story continued in an object that became a legend of the steppe. Khan Kuria ordered to make a cup from Sviatoslav's skull, binding it in gold. "Drink from this skull, and may your children be like him." There's no mockery in this gesture, only the highest recognition of an enemy's valor. The victor believed that through the ritual he takes the strength and fury of the fallen. The Khan wished for his sons the spirit of this great warrior, who sought foreign lands but laid down his head in his own. The era of great conquerors ended with the ringing of this fatal cup.
Sviatoslav Igorevich bequeathed a paradoxical legacy to his descendants. The prince pushed the borders of Rus from the Caucasus to the Balkans, wiped the Khazar Khaganate off the map, and made Byzantium tremble. But at what cost? Wars exhausted the country. The Pechenegs, the very nomads he himself had drawn into big politics, severed key trade routes. But most terrifying of all, the state lost its master. In Kiev, the eldest son, Yaropolk, ascended to reign. Looming behind his back is the shadow of Sveneld, the cunning voivode who survived the bloodbath at the rapids. The middle brother, Oleg, rules the Drevlian lands, and in the cold north, in Novgorod, the youngest lies in wait. The bastard, the son of the housekeeper, Malusha, Vladimir. The peace between brothers hangs by a thread. The blood of Sviatoslav, soaked into the Dnieper sand, will give rise to a new, ruthless war. We are already working on the continuation of our saga. Forget the canonical image of the benevolent old man from the icons. Before you will stand the real Vladimir, a beast who drenched Rus in blood for the sake of the throne. You will see the true drama of the Rurikid fratricide, how the legitimate heir, Yaropolk, fell under the swords of Varangians right in the doorway of his father's tower, the tragedy of the Polotsk princess Rognieda, who became the prey of the son of a slave, and how, through the siege of Korsun and human sacrifices, the pagan broke the backs of the old gods, erecting the building of a new civilization. This is the story of how a bastard became a Khagan and a murderer became a saint. Subscribe so you don't miss the next season. Vladimir, Baptism by Blood, the Birth of an Empire.